Hi, and welcome to Care for Creative's Community Conversations. Care for Creatives is a partnership between George Washington University and the DC Creative Affairs Office. This program is focused on two things: providing the community with conversations about mental health and creatives, and offering pay-what-you-can therapy through the Community Counseling Services Center at the Foggy Bottom campus of GW. Today's guest is Earica Busby, founder of Un.Caged. Thank you so much, Earica, for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
You know, I would love it if you could just start by telling me a little bit more about Un.Caged, what it is, what it means, any of it. I want to know more.
So Un.Caged is understanding, caregiving, aging, and grief effortlessly. And It's a once a month podcast where I discuss about caregiving, aging, and grief. And it was birthed out of the loss of my mom, who passed in December 29, 2021 from complications of COVID.
I'm so sorry.
So it was just my way of sharing my experiences that I've learned, and realizing that my peers are going to go through the same thing that I have experienced. And if I can help them to navigate this process, because everything that I learned was like trial and error, and just kind of being a resource center for those people who will go through what I go through, or I've gone through.
Yeah. Wow, it's so, I love how rooted in your own experience that is. And I feel like hearing you say you had to kind of figure it all out on your own seems like a really common experience that people have. Is that what you have seen? That people just come to you and say, I just have no idea what I was supposed to be doing or how to do this?
Well, I've always been the type of person that likes to share information. I don't care what it is, from a sale to anything. I was a caregiver to my mom for 12 years. And for 8 of those years, I was the primary person that's handling everything. So a lot of the things that I've learned, it was basically as we went along. And I would just share that information, you know, with my friends, my peers, and they would have people reach out to me if they knew that they were going through some of the things that I had already gone through. And then I would just tell them how to navigate the healthcare system and the things that they would need to tell them in order to get the treatment or to stay longer. So this basically kind of, I guess, was always in me. And then me navigating the loss of my mom, which was, you know, it's still difficult because it's only been, 2 years. So it's still very hard. And no one never really talks about, grief and everything that you have to go through. So basically, Un.Caged was created out of that.
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. We don't do enough in our community and in our world, really, to talk about the impact of grief and the loss that we experience. And even having gone through the years that you did working with her, that loss can feel unexpected, even when it's like, it's coming.
Right.
And
I don't think you can ever prepare yourself for it, Again, my mom was in the hospital in and out for 12 years, and I knew at some point that one day she probably wouldn't come home from the hospital. But even still with that, you can't prepare yourself for death.
Right.
And just also with being a caregiver, because, we're in an age now where we're moving into that dynamic where kids are starting to take care of their parents, but we're also still working our lives, having our lives, and then having to have our own family and manage our moms or our parents or loved ones. So basically, I kind of instruct and talk to my friends about how to navigate that, being a caregiver, making sure that you take care of yourself while you're taking care of your parents or your loved one, because it can be very challenging, and a lot of people don't talk about that. And they're not really interested, I think, in this whole topic until they're put into that situation.
Yeah, I think, and I will be just genuine and say that I'm in this same situation myself at this point in my life, and you don't think about it until it's here. and maybe we're blocking it out. We don't expect that it maybe would happen to us. But do you feel like the work that you have done has kind of helped you heal through that process, that helping others and engaging with others and having this podcast where you are giving people information, has that helped in your healing?
It definitely has helped in my healing process. But I feel, I guess with the whole grief thing, it's kind of weird because grief has no expiration date.
Yeah.
And so even in these moments, you still kind of feel some type of way. And just even like today, having this opportunity to talk to you, and then you're excited that you get to share this experience, but the one person that you want to share the experience with isn't here. So you have those moments where grief just shows up and you're like, okay, but you have to push through, you have to get through. And again, like I said, grieving the loss of my mom has been very, difficult for me. I've lost people before, but this one has definitely impacted me differently than all the other ones. And basically through my faith and my therapy, I am in therapy, has helped me to navigate the process and also to be able, to be a support to those who are going through. One of my best friends, she lost her father over a year ago. So what I've gone through helped to get her through, the process.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on a really big cultural issue that we have, which is that we don't, I loved what you just said about how that the grieving process doesn't really end. It changes, it evolves, it shifts, but it doesn't really end, right? Because that person is gone.
Yeah, I think you also become a different person. After you lose someone significantly, you're not the person that you was a year ago. And I feel like I'm trying to find my way and trying to figure out who I am, because for 12 years my life revolved around my mom, from going to doctor's appointments. And as I mentioned before, for 12 years she was in and out of the hospital. She was in a rehab facility. So much of my life was tied up to her. And so now I'm just trying to, figure life out again, and get me back. And someone told me, or my therapist said, you're not going to be the same person that you were, a year ago. So get used to the person that you're becoming now.
Right. You were just talking about identity, and I think I really appreciated what you were saying about how when you lose someone, you're a different person. I mean, just at the surface level, you were someone who had a parent, and now you're someone who doesn't have that parent. And there's so many shifts that you go through in terms of the change that has in, you no longer have this generation above you. You no longer have, that concept of being the child. And it makes me wonder if while you were caregiving for your mom, and this is coming from a personal place as well, do you feel like there was a lot of emotional shift that had to happen in your identity when you started having to take care of her and being the one who was, in essence, being the parent? And like the shifts maybe in her personality or her presentation?
There's definitely a personality change once you start to, it's like you become a parent to your parent. And my mom was very stubborn, and she wanted what she wanted. She didn't listen a lot of the times, but I have siblings, so we all pretty much helped. But I felt like I was the disciplinarian when it came to her, because I was strictly, by the book with certain things. And it does change the dynamics of your relationship with your parent when you're also taking care of them, which is a little weird. And I also feel like with my mom, she kind of in some ways became a child, because we were having to do so much for her. And it's definitely you kind of have to make sure, I just would like to tell people, make sure that when you start that transition of being a caregiver, to like set some ground rules, set boundaries, and also make sure you're taking care of yourself while you're taking care of your loved ones. Because for years, majority of the time, like I said, my mom was sick for 12. In 8 of those years, I did 90% of the work. And I neglected myself, you know, my mental as well as, you know, my physical health, because I was so focused on her. And depending on the illnesses that your parents have or the things that they go through, you're on an emotional roller coaster. So it's very important to take care of your mental health.
Yeah, I think that is, but I can relate to and understand you're talking about like that you take on a parent role instead of being the child. You have to step up in a way that this person that you have in many ways, this person set the stage for how you approach life, right?
Definitely.
That connection in childhood with our parent, it creates who we are. And then suddenly that dynamic shifts. And we're left having to figure out, like, well, who am I now? And how do I, did you feel like you had to, as part of your self-care, I'm wondering, like, think through any previous hurts with your mom or challenges you'd had with her, and how did you navigate that part?
Well, I would say, so my mom and I, to be fully transparent, we did have a crazy relationship. It was like a love-hate with salt and pepper, oil and vinegar.
Okay.
But for me, when my mom got sick, that was my mom. I did not allow whatever I felt or what we were going through to affect that.
Okay.
And I've always lived by honor thy mother and thy father, thy days should be longer upon this earth. And so at her worst place, I wasn't going to come on her or come down on her. You didn't do this, or, you know, our relationship is this.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I loved my mom.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that she was going to be okay. And I mean, for some people, it's different. And I've had someone to ask me, you know, that question, well, you know, if you don't have the best relationship with your parent, how do you do it? And basically for me, it's the God in me and me honoring her in the process. And I think sometimes when you show people different, despite them knowing that they treated you different, it shifts. And I knew that near the end of my mom's death, and I don't know whether she knew she was passing. They said that some people know. I did see a shift in my mom, where she became more grateful, more thankful, and always assured me that she was thankful that I was there for her.
Wow. That's really powerful that she was able, because what I'm hearing you say is that by not holding those grudges, by not holding on to that pain and making it the primary issue with you and your mom, by saying, and you know, God and religion and spirituality, it is one of the strongest meaning-making tools that we have, and it is so powerful to be able to say, you know what, I am called to respond in this way, and this is how I'm going to respond. And the evidence of the outcome where your mom was eventually just able to be grateful, I think, I don't know, I'm just kind of sitting in the testimony that is.
Well, I will say that even with all of that, and then me going through the grieving process, I did have to seek therapy, you know, to cope with my grief. I did learn that how I responded to certain things, it was because I had unhealed trauma.
Yeah.
And so my therapist was like, you know, you have some unhealed trauma. I'm like, I don't have no unhealed trauma. But when she started to break it down to me, I noticed, like, yeah, that could be. You know, people have said that before, how I responded to things, and you don't realize sometimes your response to different things is based off of a bad experience or unhealed trauma. So then now I'm having to navigate to shift that, and it's a little difficult because you can't have that conversation, you know, with that person, or even if you do have the conversation with part of the person that had it, it doesn't always come out the same, because I do have my father is still living, and he's 88 years old. So, you know, and he's set in his ways. He's a different, you know, it's different dynamic. So you have to learn to navigate that without getting the answers and the responses, you know, you need.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about trauma. I'm a trauma therapist. One of the things that I always like to say to people is that trauma is really just learning. It's what we learned, right? When we're younger, it's fear-based learning. So any situation we were in as a child that there was any fear involved for us, and when you're a child, things are fearful. You're fearful of things that don't make sense to an adult. So to your point about, like, you think you get to an adulthood and you go, I don't think I have trauma around any of this stuff, because your adult brain kind of grows over the child brain and goes, this is fine.
Right. And you just have to, I mean, you know, it changes your perspective on things. And so for me, I'm constantly making sure that I'm thinking before I react, just to make sure, so that I could heal and be my most authentic, whole self coming forward.
Yeah. I think that, again, it's a powerful testament to being intentional and being open. You're a very open and engaged person, and I think that definitely shows in the work that you're doing.
Well, I definitely would say it's challenging to actually have to go back and figure things out that you thought that you had passed or navigated. So I just believe that I think everybody should do therapy, for real. But
I agree.
You know, you definitely have to make sure that you're ready to put in the work, because it's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with other things, just life in general, and then you're trying to navigate grief and become your whole self and get back into your daily routine of going out with your friends and partaking in different activities. Is definitely can be a challenge.
Yeah. For better or for worse, the thought that always comes into my mind about this is the idea of the only way out is through. And that so often we try to avoid grief, we try to avoid the negative. And I work with and teach young counselors who are learning how to become counselors, and often the idea is, oh, well, I want to make therapy this space where they come in and they feel comfortable and the whole time and they don't ever get upset. And I'm like, well, no, actually, therapy's hard. Therapy is about that going through and not avoiding and not going around. And I think you're providing such a beautiful description of what therapy is, which is it's going in and doing that work. And it's hard.
I think that reality TV has messed us up when it comes to therapy, because you think it's an instant and a quick fix, and it isn't. It's definitely a process, and I think that what you put in is what you get out. And some people don't agree, especially in the African community. We don't believe in quote unquote therapy. So for me, I'm breaking generational curses. I'm getting the help that I need to be the best version of myself. And therapy has taught me a lot about myself, how to deal with people, and also to know that I didn't have boundaries. And then, so boundaries is very important. Even as a caregiver, you have to have boundaries. So I just recommend therapy for everyone.
Well, I'm 100% on board with that as well. I think it's part of the reason why we created this entire program, which was the idea that therapy is really valuable. Sometimes you need to be in it for a few years. Sometimes you can resolve something in a couple, depending on what it is, in a couple of weeks or, or longer. But the value of having that space is just immeasurable.
And sometimes you have to, go through a couple of people to find, your right fit for therapy. You're not going to always get the best person. This is actually my third therapist. I started going to therapy during COVID because I was feeling a little depressed because of having to be in the house 24/7, and then also just being a caregiver too during COVID with my mom. It was very challenging. And so not always having a safe place to just let your emotions out, and therapy definitely offers a safe, non-judgment space where you can just let out whatever you're feeling, and then they understand, and then they kind of give you a course action of kind of how to move forward, or provide, suggestions on how they think, you should, handle certain situations.
Yeah, it is very helpful. And I wanted to kind of circle back just quickly before we run out of time, because I want to ask you a couple more questions about, you were bringing up boundaries. When you talk to people on your podcast, when you talk about helping people navigate dealing with their parents, what are some of the boundaries that you feel like you had to set that would be maybe helpful for people listening, that they could start thinking about how, because boundaries are such good self-care, right? That's their core.
Well, for me, I didn't have any boundaries while taking care of my mom. So I think that's why it was so difficult and it was so hard. So I tell people, if you have siblings, you should definitely come up with a schedule, because caregiving can be difficult. Like I said, you have your own job, your life, your kids, your families. So actually setting up what you can do and not being forced or manipulated to do more. This is what I can offer. This is what I can give, and stick to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think especially what's really interesting to me is, as someone who has also many siblings and navigating some of these things as we get older, is that you have also all the dynamics that you had as siblings, as children, come out again as adults, and having to figure out how to set boundaries with each other and set boundaries with the caregiving and take care of ourselves in the midst of it, so that we can continue to engage in it.
Right, and the schedule is definitely good when you have siblings. So everyone doesn't have to do the same thing on the same day, because you really do need a break. There was a time I was doing stuff constantly every day because it was one point I wasn't working. So I felt, my siblings have to work. There's no need of them taking off. I can do it. But one of my siblings would be like, well, I'm off on Friday. You don't have to do anything. So whatever you want to do that Friday, just go ahead and do it. Just tell me what needs to be done. So definitely, I think having a schedule, and also making sure that you guys are all on the same page when it comes to the care of your parent. Again, some people are going to veer off, but you just have to make sure that you're all in agreement and in line with the best way to care for your loved one.
I think that's really, really valuable. I will give my siblings and I some credit that we did have a joint meeting, all of us together with my parents, to have a discussion about what this was like moving forward, and we made it happen.
Right, and honest conversation too. I think a lot of times people don't want to have those honest conversations.
Yeah.
And I will say that I think we, as our parents age, we do need to sit down and have that conversation with them. How do you see your life as you're getting old? What are your wants and desires?
Right.
Are you going to live with one of the siblings? Do you want to be on your own? Do you want to be independent? We don't have those, conversations. So we really don't know. And then, sometimes your parents don't want to talk about that because it's really hard for them to give up their independence. And I know for my mom, it was really hard for her having to rely so much on her children because she was so used to doing things for herself. So I think we really do need to start having those conversations with our parents so that we can better navigate the process.
Yeah. Earica, it's so, listening to you talk about this, it's so important. It just is so important, because I'm relating to that idea of, like, you understanding that your parent is also going through this change of a loss of control and a loss of independence that they've had their whole lives. And yeah, there's so many layers and dynamics. I'm so grateful that you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And having the podcast that you have, because I hope everyone watches it, listens to it, and learns from it. And I want to, just before we end, ask you if there's anything, what's coming up for you, any other initiatives or things that you've been working on?
Well, I'm still doing my podcast. I'm just trying to elevate it and take it to the next level. My long-term goal is to once a year have a symposium where I can bring people from the healthcare industry in, as well as aging, to get your life insurance and all of that in place and prepare for life after, and just have a forum where people can learn information and prepare for what's to come, because I'm aging, and so I'm currently making sure that my business is in order for my loved ones. That's the best gift that you can give to your loved one, is to make sure your affairs are in order.
Yeah, I love that. That should be written somewhere big for everyone, right? You taking care of yourself and planning ahead for your own aging process is the best gift you can give to the people around you that love you.
Yes.
I think that's really powerful. Thank you so much for being here today and talking about this. I feel like it's such an important topic that just doesn't get talked about. And I've been talking to other people I know in my life who are much younger than me and saying, you have to start thinking about these things.
Yes.
Because we don't think about them soon enough. So.
Thank you for the opportunity, for allowing me to share my story. And
thank you, Earica, for joining us. And thank you all for joining us as well. I'd like to give a special thank you to Mayor Muriel Bowser and Director LaToya Foster for making this possible. For more information on Care for Creatives, visit www.creativeaffairsdc.com.